Welcome to the Strategic Leader Podcast with me, Gemma Bullivant, and my co-host, Fiona Craig. This podcast is for HR professionals and people-focused leaders from any function who want to think, act, and feel naturally more strategic. Enjoy the show. Hi everyone, and welcome back. Hi Fee, welcome.
Thanks, Gem. And I think we really do need to say a massive hello to our listeners today.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that we haven't quite got our heads around yet, but we're starting to discover that there's quite a lot of you. And we are really, really massively grateful to you. So a massive hello to everybody who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Frank. Thanks for all your encouraging messages. We know you're a regular listener. So thanks for engaging on us with that. Fee, what about you?
So let's say hello to Townsy as well, somebody I used to work with many moons ago. And it's been such a fabulous way of reconnecting with so many people. So thank you so much for listening. We would be really grateful to hear your thoughts on what you'd like us to talk about, anything you're struggling with, anything you want to know more about. So what are we talking about today then?
Yes, so today we're going to be talking about that situation that often occurs where you are now the manager of a team that you used to be a team member. And we come across it quite a lot, don't we, in our coaching? And I've come across it quite a lot in my HR experience as well. It's an interesting dynamic. It poses quite a few challenges, and we thought it would be a good area to explore in the context of this particular series of the podcast, which is really looking at all aspects of working with others. So, becoming the manager of a team that you were once a team member. Sophie, do you have experience of this in your illustrious career thus far?
My illustrious career. Well, yes, I do. I wouldn't say this was the most illustrious moment of my career, but yeah, probably 20 years ago, I was a fairly new member in a team. I'd been in for about a year, maybe a year and a little bit. And a role for managing that team became available, which was 2 grades above me. And I went for it along with someone else who was also in the same team, and he was 1 grade above me. And I got it. So I had to become the manager of the team that I was in. It was my first management role. And I'd also been promoted over somebody who was more senior than me to start with.
Oh,
And then
double whammy.
double whammy, and then became more junior than me. So yes, I remember this very well. And it was my first management role. And yeah, maybe it's a subject lesson in how not to do it, because I definitely got a few things wrong in those days. But if I take myself out of this, I've heard really similar stories from coaches. I think it's just a thing, isn't it? It's a difficult shift to make.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I've coached quite a few people who have experienced the challenges of being promoted in, and managing the team you were once part of. And in one particular case, possibly not dissimilar to your example and your experience, where she leapfrogged her colleague to then become the manager of somebody who was quite significantly more senior in many ways, but she was appointed above her. And it does present a few challenges, doesn't it? So shall we get stuck into some of those challenges? What would you say stands out for you, Fee, as main challenges in that sort of situation?
Well, I guess a couple of things. One is that I only anticipated the good stuff. I'd had a promotion, I was getting a pay rise, I had a new job title, I got to go to more senior meetings. I could see all of those things and I was thrilled about them. But I couldn't see the challenges. So they just tripped me up because I hadn't expected them. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that I had not really got a sense of myself as a leader, as a manager of the team. I had no real sense of who was Fee as a manager, who was Fee as a leader. That hadn't really developed yet. So I guess I flip-flopped between wanting to stay part of the team and wanting to be part of the gang and, oh, nothing's changed. And, oh, I'm not going to, I'm not going to suddenly pull rank on you. A flip flop between that and pulling rank and being, I'm the manager of the team. This is how we're going to do it. And so, I think inconsistency would be another thing that I got wrong. And it's, we'll really unpick that, because there's a lot going on in terms of wanting to stay part of a team, wanting to be liked by that team, having to put yourself in a position where you may need to deliver unpleasant or unpopular messages to that team. There's a lot around that. There's also something around how you identify, because I still identified as a member of that team. I hadn't yet really started to identify as a member of the SLT. I went to the
Mm.
meetings, I had the job title, but I didn't really see myself as, I am a member of the senior leadership team in this organization. And that is where my main allegiance really needs to lie. I definitely need to balance that allegiance to the leadership team, balance it with my leadership of my own acquisition team.
How did that show up when you were working kind of in the SLT, but also then when you were coming back to the team?
Okay, so I can think of one example. We had, it was fairly progressive given that this was 20 years ago, but we had a system of Flexi Time, which was, Flexi Time is a brilliant thing. I massively support it, but it can be taken advantage of. And on occasion, it was taken advantage of in this organization. So at senior leadership level, we were talking about, well, how do we just get a little bit stricter with how the Flexi Time is used? And we put a couple of rules in place. And when I was in that conversation, I was like, yes, I agree with this. I support it. I buy into this. I see what we're trying to achieve. I see what the organization needs. Then I went back to my team, and I noticed in retrospect, I obviously didn't notice this at the time, but in retrospect, my language changed to they, the leadership team. They want us to start doing something different. They have said that we can't use Flexi Time the way that we were doing it before. They are insisting that we do it like this. So I was passing the message on, but I wasn't getting behind the message. I was kind of distancing myself from it because I knew it would be unpopular. So there was a sense that I was still trying to be part of my acquisition team. I didn't want to deliver an unpopular message. And that created problems, because in the moment, in the meeting, I was siding with my guys. I was like, oh yeah, God, it's really awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was colluding with them. And the impact of that was that they were always going to have to toe the line anyway with the new rules. They were always going to have to get on board at some point, but we just got on board later than all the other teams. And so that
Right.
affected badly on me. That was slight. It wasn't that bad news, but it was a slight change that wasn't massively popular, that they were going to have to get on board with. And I should have stayed in this is a leadership team decision. I get the fact that you don't love it. I hear you, but the point is we're going to have to do it because we have decided, the business needs us to do it. And I'm behind it, and I'm an ambassador for that change. And I'm an ambassador as a spokesman for the senior leadership team. But because I hadn't sort of identified as that member, I didn't position it like that. So I'm
That sense
definitely.
of identity is really important, isn't it? And that is something that comes up a lot when I'm coaching clients on this type of situation, where it might be sort of a part of some first 90-day coaching. You've been promoted, you're new to the role. What do I need to do? What do I need to think about? How do I need to prepare to make the right impact? What impact do I want to make? All of those sorts of really useful questions to really consider when you're starting a new role. When it's an internal promotion, it has that added complexity because whilst we already know the organization, we know a lot of what we would otherwise need to get our heads around in a new job, in a new organization, we've got this identity that we carry with us from our previous role that we actually need to often question or amend or evolve
Or shed some of that. We might need to shed some of that.
and shed. Absolutely. It's a great word. And I use that word quite a lot. How do I shed the reputation, the responsibilities, the identity, to go back to that part of the equation, which is, who am I now in this scenario? What is my role here in this scenario? And have I actually got my head round that?
Yeah.
Have I started to own that new identity that might mean that I am no longer a friend in the sense of how I might have been as a peer,
Yeah.
because I have that managerial responsibility that might mean that I sometimes have to deliver some unpopular news. I have to potentially performance manage constructively. I have this new set of responsibilities. So I almost need to figure out how that belongs in my new identity in this role, in this particular scenario.
And so, I mean, you've touched upon a few of the things that go wrong. I think, I mean, I tend to hear the same kind of expressions coming out if I'm coaching someone that's been in this situation, and I have a lot of empathy. But I have things like, I don't want them to think that I'm pulling rank, or I don't want them to think I'm a real tosser, or I don't want to think I'm a bossy cow, or, you know, any of this language. There's a real sense of, oh, I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to kind of overstep. I don't want to piss the guys off in my team. And I think what we can get, and I certainly remember this, is we can kind of get in our own heads, and that doesn't help us make good decisions. So I guess a couple of the perspectives that we're going to look at today is how to look outside of that through the lens of what the organization is requiring from somebody in this more senior role, and also what do the members of the team need from a team lead. And then also, I guess, what does your leadership version of you look like? And
Right.
if you were to step outside of your worrying and deep sort of self-consciousness in this moment, how would you start to tap into what does myself as a leader, or the next level of leader, look like? And what's my leadership identity? And all of those things are slightly more constructive places to think about this. You
Yeah.
know, there's an idea that I'm going to be unpopular with the people that I used to be peers with is a really pervasive, very strong pull.
Yes. And it's a really important one to tackle head on and accept the fact that it is a different role. It
Yes.
is a different version of the role that you were doing before, because there is a whole other set of expectations, circumstances, what the organization needs from you, as you rightly point out, and therefore how you want to show up with that set of new responsibilities. And the first thing that often gets in the way of that is how you then get in your own way, basically,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
what you continue to carry in terms of identity. So in your earlier example, I would imagine your identity was still one of being part of the team.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was.
You hadn't shifted that identity up. You'd done it in the moment when you were in the SLT meeting,
Yes,
but you weren't carrying it 100% of the time.
that's right. And I think it's worth, I mean, it's a good point to note that I was given no help in that transition. Nobody
Mhm.
mentioned it to me like this might be a bit of a challenge, or how do you think you're going to tackle this? I know you have provided coaching for people, like first 90 days coaching. So I guess if there is anyone out there that's listening to, well, how can we help people go through this? The idea of some support in terms of coaching or in terms of leadership development at that moment would be an amazing thing to offer people that you're asking to step up. And if it's you, you know, I think I didn't ask for anything. I didn't say, okay, who is going to backfill my role? What's the structure of me stepping up? Because I remember starting to go to SLT meetings way before the date that I was actually swapping over, because they just were there and they were like, well, you might as well start coming. But I was like, okay, so now I'm in a real no man's land because I haven't actually got the promotion to the end of the month. And yet you're asking me to go to the team meetings. So there was a real fuzziness, and it didn't occur to me to say, yes, I really want to do this, but can we put some rules around how it's structurally around how it's going to be done, how I'm going to be supported, how my role is going to be backfilled, how I'm supposed to take these extra responsibilities on before I'd shed the other responsibilities, the kind of the
Yes.
day job. I think that's a massive thing that's often missed, isn't it?
And if the answer to any professional support from the organization is a big fat no, then there's a version of that that you can do for yourself, because if you think about it, it is quite broadly applicable, the sorts of skills and techniques that you might apply to going into a meeting, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, going in very intentionally with what do I want to get out of this meeting? What do other people need? What are other people going to bring to this meeting? How do I want to show up at this meeting? All of those sorts of questions that we can apply to a thing like going, having a good meeting or
Mhm.
having a good interaction with someone. You can actually widen that and slightly repurpose some of those questions to say, what do I need from this role? What is my role? How do I want to show up? What are the expectations of
Mm.
the various stakeholders, the organization, the team, other people? How do I want to show up as a leader of that group? How do I want to show up as a member of the SLT? Start asking yourself some really intentional questions and then just put some answers to that. Really, that's the start of creating that kind of structure for yourself. So if you can't get some coaching support or some support in the way that you've been talking about, there are some things you could do for yourself in that regard, which would be a hell of a lot better than doing nothing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the three lenses that we will briefly talk about may give you some structure to those questions. And I guess what you've already touched upon the first one, which is what kind of leader do I want to be? What do I think good looks like? What are the leadership models that I've seen so far, good and bad? Let's not assume that all the leadership models we've come across are good.
Mm.
There's lots of people that sort of replicate the leadership styles of people that they had early on in their career without necessarily querying, well, was that good? I mean, did it work for you and everybody else? So there's a piece of work around what kind of leader do I want to be? What are the available styles of leadership?
Yeah, and I've done some work with on this with leaders in the past where I've asked them to just think of a leader that has really inspired them or that stands out to them as an example of a great leader. And to your point, that you don't get the same answer. So I have done this with a group of leaders as part of a group exercise, and they come up with the most diverse types of leaders that for whatever reason they have has truly resonated with them, they have related to, and it has in some way inspired them and inspired something in them. So, yes, absolutely. There is no one version of leadership. And I would say that on the whole, the best version of leadership is something that feels the most natural to you. Obviously, there's an abundance of caveats to that statement because not all leaders are great, even if that's their natural style. Elon Musk looking at you. So, it's about just thinking about this quite flexibly and quite authentically. And sometimes the starting point is who has inspired me? Who has been the leader that I can think about that has really helped me to formulate my idea of what good
Mm.
leadership looks like? So I think that's a good starting point.
And I've asked a very similar question. And one of the best answers somebody came up with was not one of their leaders or managers that they've ever had. It was the pop star Pink. And it was like, well, that's quite unexpected. But they said, well, because she is able to kind of bring her sort of messy, authentic self and just accept the fact that she isn't perfect, but she's trying to do her best. And people really respond to that. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting perspective on leadership. So you can think outside the box a little. It doesn't have to be your actual leaders. You can think of people that you admire, I guess, and take little composite parts from them. That was a really interesting one for me.
Yeah.
So I guess then
So
there's
the first lens is what type of leader or what version of leadership is it that you want to bring? Intentionally thinking about that in terms of style and behaviors that you would want to bring to that team. What's the next lens?
so the next one is about looking at the team itself and saying what do they need? And when we touched upon this earlier on and we said actually there's two parts of this team bit. One is I'm going to lead this team as the leader of this team, and therefore how does it need to go? It may be that nothing much needs to change. It may be that all the processes need overhauling. It could be anything. But as well as that, what does the team need? There's an angle, and again, this was something I got wrong, which is let's look at all the individuals within that team as well, because their experience of you moving into your new role may not be the same. And certainly for me, there were a couple of people in the team that had always kind of looked up to me, even when I wasn't the team lead. And they found it very easy for me to shift into that leadership role. one person in the team who was great. There was no animosity between us at all, but I'd been promoted over him. So understandably, it was just a prickly dynamic, and I didn't recognize that I probably needed to lean into that more with him than with the others. And I just went, no, I'm going to treat everyone the same. And I didn't acknowledge that he needed something different from everyone else. So that sense of, okay, yes, we very much want to look at it as a team, but we also need to look at what other people need from us as individuals. What did the individual members of my team need from me and need from this
Yeah.
shift?
And this really leans into the concepts more broadly about stakeholder management and how you interact with stakeholders more widely, which is to say that in the context of a team essentially is a group of individuals who
Yeah.
happen to work with each other. So looking at the team just purely as one big amorphous group and how do I get the best out of them as a group is going to miss the fact that each individual in that group of people is likely to have a slightly different perspective, or perhaps quite a starkly different perspective, motivation, viewpoint, trust in you as the
Yeah.
leader, etc. So they're going to need some different tactics, if that's the right word,
Yeah.
to and certainly some different interactions and a different approach perhaps on an individual level, while still holding the group and the team as a team as well, just thinking about that frame. But the team is a group of individuals.
Yeah. So there's two parts to that. So that's the second lens to look through, which is what does a team need from me? And then the third lens to look through, which may be more helpful to you, is what does the organization need from somebody in this role?
Mm.
And this, I guess, touches back on this sense of identity. If I need to identify as a member of the leadership team, I need to see myself as somebody who is now operating at a more senior level, and what is required of somebody at that senior level. So it's going to require me to have a greater sense of the purpose of the organization, a greater understanding of the strategy, a greater connection with the numbers. It's going to require me to connect to a different level of stakeholder, perhaps. It's going to need me to represent that group to my team and indeed anybody else. So it sometimes sometimes it's helpful to say, what does the organization need of somebody in this role? Because that's an easier question to answer than, oh my God, what am I supposed to do here? So if I think about this idea of, how do I treat all the individuals in my team? If it was just me, I'll go, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's really quite awkward with this guy. I think I'm just going to ignore it and treat everyone the same. But if I had gone, what does the organization require of somebody at this level? I probably would have said, the organization requires someone at this level to have each individual member of their team on board. And if I'd answered it like that, I would have tackled each individual separately, which meant I would have had that open and honest and possibly slightly prickly conversation with him right up front, because I would have needed everybody on board. So I'd ask a different question of yourself and you will get a different kind of answer.
Mm. And it circles back, doesn't it, to that whole question of identity that we started with, that first lens, because what does the organization need from me? The organization needs me to hold the space in that team from a senior perspective that guides that team according to that compass direction that is determined at that senior level. So you don't want there to be lots of deviation
Yeah.
from the compass direction that's been established for important reasons, for strategic purposes, and then as it disseminates through the team levels, it starts to get diluted or even changed inadvertently, often because of that disconnect between feeling like you're a member of the SLT and feeling like you're still a bit of a colleague and a friend.
Yeah, because in that, if we use my Flexi Time example, the organization needed everybody to get on board with the tightening of the rules around
Yeah.
flex. That is what the organization needed for profitability purposes, in order to stay profitable, in order to keep everyone's jobs, right? I can see that looking from the outside. And if I'd asked that broad question, what does the organization need? I would probably have got some sort of answer in that space.
Mm.
that would have led me to behave very differently than, what do I need? I need to make sure these people don't dislike me because I'm their new manager and I don't want them to think I'm a tosser. That's,
Mm.
so I asked the wrong question.
Was there ever a sense in that example that you gave, from your perspective, that you can remember, that you in any way doubted the fact that you'd got the role as being sort of the right decision? In other words, the dreaded imposter type
Mm.
scenario, or that you didn't necessarily believe that you had the skills in that time? Or did you have trust that you did actually have those skills? Because I think sometimes that can get in the way, can't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I actually don't, I don't think I thought of myself as an imposter. I mean, there were definitely little moments. There were definitely things that I struggled with. I'd had a kind of creative background and I needed to get my head around the numbers. So there were definitely some moments where my credibility around the numbers let me down, and my commercial, just my grasp of the commercials. So I had to work really, really hard on that. But I didn't really have that, actually, now that I think
Mhm.
about it. But talking to coaches who have been in similar situations, I think that's a really common thing.
Mm.
Um, and I guess the answer to that I would give to them objectively is, I remember having this conversation, is, do you trust the people that hired you? I mean, it's the same as getting any new job, actually, but it's particularly important internally. Do you trust the people who put you in that position? Do you trust the hiring process? Do you trust your own manager and whatever that leadership team is that you're now a member of? Because they put you there. It wasn't you going, hey, I can do it. And then you just ended up being there.
I find myself saying the same thing often. I can hear that you doubt your legitimacy of having this role. I can hear that in how you're talking, the language that you're using, and what you're saying. But somebody, multiple people, I would imagine, in the business have made the decision that this is the role for you based on what I can only imagine is what they've observed in your skills and what they believe you have the ability to deliver. Therefore, we need to question whether that is even a thing, because that can often get in the way, can't it?
Totally.
That self-doubt, that perpetual self-doubt that really you shouldn't have the job that you have.
Well, and almost more than that, because I mean, you said that they've decided this is the job for you. But even more than that, they've decided that you are the right person for this job.
Yes.
And they are not going to sit there and go, all right, we're going to put Gemma in this role because we think she'll mess it up and we'll all have a good laugh.
Yeah.
That is not their objective. Their objective is, we want to put Gemma in this role because we need a really good person in this role. So
Yeah.
therefore it's going to be Gemma. And it's like, you have to remember that that conversation did happen.
Yes.
And
Sometimes you just have to put it on a Post-it note and just keep looking at it every day. I mean, it literally can be as basic as that, can't it? Well, I think if we've covered some really interesting perspectives there, and there's certainly things that I've come across in coaching people who have found themselves in this situation. And, we're interested in your perspective too. So if any of these points have resonated for you, then do get in touch. Do let us know so that we can maybe help, highlight some other things that may be relevant to you. If we've missed something, give us a nudge.
well, I've quite enjoyed digging up my I mean, it wasn't, the whole thing was largely successful, but there were certainly some disastrous moments in there. So, I mean, I guess the other thing is, you will balls a bit of it up, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. If your heart is in the right place, you will get to the right place. But, it's worth thinking about, because there's slightly more to it than I think we anticipate.
Great stuff. And if you're not in the situation of leading the team that you manage, but you're pondering whether or not to go for the job opportunity that might put you in that position, I say go for it.
So do I.
Marvellous.
And on that note, we will leave you. Thanks so much, Jem. Thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Strategic Leader. If you liked the episode, please subscribe to access more of our recordings. And if you think it'd be useful for someone else, please forward to them and leave a review. We base our content on questions we are regularly asked and what you want to know more about, so please do email us with any questions or comments to gemma@gemmabullivant.co.uk. And remember, you're already being more strategic than you realise.